Hey Tom, look what I got.
Hey.
It's a new mouse.
Ooh, cool.
So you know I like mice.
You do. You've given me quite a few.
I have a lot of mice.
Yeah.
This is a new one from Logitech that came out just a few weeks ago. It's their G302.
This is the one we had in the office earlier too as well, right?
Yeah, we did. We got it a few weeks ago. It's their new MOBA mouse.
Right.
That they designed to have like really fast click activation, stuff like that. But I actually got this when I went to their offices in Switzerland this week.
Cool.
Just got back a few days ago. It was a whirlwind trip flying from San Francisco to Switzerland, but it was but it was cool because we got to see inside their labs where they do basically all the testing, stress testing on their mice, you know, putting them through millions and millions of clicks at a time.
Right.
Same thing for their keyboards, and it's also where they design like the mice sensors. They actually do all the engineering work to take this sensor, work on the lens, you know, adjust everything from the DPI of the mouse to the tracking speed and all that stuff. So it's basically Logitech's haven of science, I guess. And I got to go inside, so that was pretty cool.
What'd you learn? What'd you find out? That sounds awesome.
So probably my favorite part of it were the testing facilities, right? Because they have all these machines that they built specifically to stress test their mice.
Huh.
So this one they just put out, but they put out another mouse earlier this year, the G402, which is their FPS mouse.
Okay.
And for that one, they did this interesting thing where they took a sensor that was really effective at low DPI movements or at low movement speeds rather. So the DPI goes up to like 6,000 or so, but if you try to move the mouse really, really fast, it loses tracking accuracy. But it was really good at low speeds, right? So they took that and they paired it with an accelerometer and a gyroscope so that once it passes that kind of speed threshold, the accelerometer takes over, and those are really accurate at high speeds.
Right.
But they had to figure out how to test this, right, and make sure it was accurate, so they built this spring-loaded arm. And I shot some video of it, but basically this arm, when they unload the spring, it moves the mouse really, really, really quickly, and then they can test and see if the sensor remains accurate at that speed, right?
So they don't just have a bunch of competitive CSGO players shaking mice back and forth?
No, so they designed this thing to be able to track faster than anyone can actually move it. It can track up to like 500 inches per second. The fastest you're going to be able to move the mouse by yourself, even when you really put your elbow into it, it's probably like 250 or so.
Wow.
So they were trying to test it up to 500, or basically up to the point at which they could make it fail. The first machine they built wasn't fast enough. So they built another one, which was even bigger. It was this really, really long arm, and that one had, I don't know, probably a diameter of about 20 feet or so, and it would swing the mouse in this really wide arc.
Right.
And so that's the lengths they go to test their mice, which is pretty ridiculous.
They can't break the mice that they build. That's how crazy
they try
are.
pretty hard to break them.
Oh my God.
And then they had another mouse testing thing that was neat, where it had a wheel that kind of rolled underneath the mouse sensor, and that they used to test kind of how the mouse reacts to acceleration and moving at different angles. And with the same mouse, the FPS mouse, they discovered it worked really, really well at these horizontal motions that they had used the arm to test with, but it didn't track as quickly if you moved it just like forward and backwards. And so that was something that they could kind of test with that wheel, is how it would respond to different angles.
Right.
And they were able to patch that with a firmware update. So that was kind of neat.
Wow.
And keyboards were the other big thing that they showed us the testing stuff of. This is their newer keyboard, the 910 Orion Spark.
Okay.
And it's using new switches that they made. It's not cherry, which is what every mechanical keyboard uses.
Right.
And for good reason, right? People love cherry switches. I really, really like the cherry brown switches for typing. I like the cherry reds for gaming because they have that really fast kind of linear activation. And these feel pretty weird. They're new switches. I'm still not sure how I feel about them.
Yeah, they're a little squishy almost.
They're a little squishy, and that's partly because they have a super low activation point, which is kind of good, right? Because it means that it takes less time for you to activate the key when you press it down.
It definitely feels like pressing it's shallower.
It's shallower, exactly. So that's it's kind of an unusual keyboard feel. I'm still not sure if I like it as much as Cherry, but potentially for people who play at a really high competitive level, this guy is going to be better, right? Because you can press a key just fundamentally more quickly than you could press a key with a higher activation point.
It's like with a gamepad holding the trigger about like halfway right before that point.
And they designed this kind of curve around the edge of the key.
Yeah, I noticed that.
To hold your fingers in. So it's an unusual keyboard design. I'm not sure how crazy I am about it yet, but seeing the testing for it was neat because they had this machine that would press 13 buttons a second, and they would test these keyboards 24 hours a day for about 2 months to get up to 70 million activations on the keys.
God.
And their threshold for performance was after 70 million key presses, the keys still had to feel within a margin of 30% of their original kind of, I guess, quality or elasticity to the button, right?
How long would it take, do you think, to get 70 million key presses just not with a machine?
A long time? I have no idea. Probably longer than the lifespan of any keyboard you would use, right? Unless you bought one of those old IBM mechanical keyboards in the 70s and have been using it since then. Maybe you would have hit 70 million clicks by now.
Right.
But that's this guy. And
what is this thing I noticed? It's got a pull-out?
Yeah, so it has this little blue tray. I don't know if you've used any of Logitech's older gaming keyboards. They used to have this little LCD that went basically right here. It was kind of dumb, kind of dinky, right? It's a neat idea in principle. You have the second screen. You get to see I don't know, your health bar or your guns or something, right? They had some software that would tie in with some games, and you had this little LCD screen. But their mantra with this new keyboard and their kind of talking point they go back to over and over again is you have a better LCD screen in your pocket with an iPhone or an Android phone than they can put on their keyboard, and they would have to charge you $200 for it, right?
Right.
Not worth the money when you have your own. So they built some software that you can just download as an iPhone app, and you can put your iPhone here or your iPad mini. They like to demo it with a big iPad mini there. And then you can see your system specs, see your your CPU clock and temperature and that kind of stuff. And they're working on some game tie-in stuff with it so that maybe when you're playing WoW or Dota, you might be able to get some data on there about your kill deaths rating or have some of your button maps written there, whatever. They're not talking about who their actual partners are, game-wise, and it may amount to nothing, I don't know, and so it might be just kind of basic information, but it's potentially a cool feature.
And it's definitely cooler than them putting an LCD that you might not use on the screen or on the keyboard and raising the price.
It keeps the price reasonable for a mechanical keyboard, and it's it's a feature that may pay off in the end. I don't know. They also talked about some accessibility features where, this is an RGB keyboard, and they can program the way the lights work, the same way they can program the display. So for someone who is deaf, you might be able to have lights flash from one side of the screen or one side of the keyboard to the other to show you where you're getting hit in an FPS, something like that. So it's cool that they're making this available as an SDK that anybody can download and mess around with. Users can put their own profiles up and stuff. So that was neat. But mostly I just liked seeing the stress testing and seeing the buttons jamming down on keys over and over and over again. So they had a lot of cool stuff there, and that was Switzerland.
That sounds pretty awesome, but the real question is, how was the chocolate?
Good.
Oh, did you bring some?
And also
goodness.
very cheap, which
nice.
is the only thing in Switzerland that was cheap was the chocolate, so I bought about 20 pounds.
Well, I'm going to ask for about 10 of that, I think.
You can have that one.
Oh, that's the best.